Welcome, one and all, to episode number 49. 4 and a 9 for Endless Conversation Loop. We're one away from the big celebration episode. Woo! My name is Brandon, and I am here with my very hoarse co-host, who's named...
This is Boom. I sound a lot different than I usually do, mostly because I lost my voice over the weekend before we recorded. So there's going to be, at least for this episode, slightly different sounding Boom, but hopefully the energy will still stay the same as the rest of the episodes.
Indeed. We are here today to finally finish up what I did not predict would become a 3-part saga covering the game Key Card Media that has been plaguing many a Switch 2 release. But before we get into that, I know we have some intro-y mini topics that we wanted to go over. I know you have one, I have a couple. Do we want to start with yours, or did we want to go over like the one that I definitely want to get in first?
I think we should start with your first one that we have here on the Stop Killing Games signature update, since that is something that's fairly recent as well, with a episode that we did a while back. So where were we at with that?
So that was the very popular episode 44, and no, I am not covering this to like recapture any magic. The name of the episode won't reflect any of this in there. But yeah, we have an update on what's happened with that initiative. If you're not familiar with any of the background on that, stop this episode, go listen to episode 44, because we covered that in pretty like big detail on there. So, you know, if you don't know what's going on, you're probably going to want all that background. But as of October 27th, so if today's November 18th, I don't know if I mentioned that, so this is about 3 weeks back, but I still wanted to cover it because obviously it's important here. We have a grand total of 689,035 of the 1.48 million signatures that were given to that initiative verified. Remember, they need to meet 1 million signatures, so that means they're pretty close to meeting the threshold to actually like have this move forward on that front. So I think that's phenomenal news.
Yeah, that's about like 70% of the way there, which I'm actually impressed by.
Right, give or take 70%, and halfway for like all the signatures in general. So that's huge. A factor we didn't mention earlier, because like I totally missed this in the research, but at least 7 European Union countries also need to meet certain signature thresholds when they're doing this. So it's not just they need to get 1 million signatures, and 7 EU nations have to have like a certain amount of signatures, like they need to make up a certain proportion. Of the 17 nations that have met the threshold, there are 15. So that bar has been more than cleared. 15 countries doing their part. The only 2 that are out but before this becomes a sweep are Germany and France. But either way, that metric very well met, and we're like well on our way to getting to seeing them meet the 1 million signature threshold as well. So kudos to them on that. As for where they want to go next, this is from a post from the main like organizer of this thing. He's talking about, and this is not Ross Scott. This is like an actual person in Europe. Ross Scott just happens to be like a supporter of this because he believes in the ideas, right? So they're in contact with government leaders, and that's like EU people. That's like, you know, individual governments. So like, you know, Spain is a country that's in the European Union, but they don't want to just talk to like the EU people that represent Spain. They also want to represent. They want to talk to the people who like are political leaders in the country of Spain. That's the idea. And another one they mentioned were like political parties themselves. Part of the idea there, I'm sure, is like, hey, whether you are or are not in power right now, we want to get you on the record for this, and we want to get you like doing this right now. So that's another piece of the puzzle. They're also looking for backing from academics, you know, people in colleges, academia, because for one thing, it's great to have politicians in there, but when you have like really challenging questions, things that, you know, require a lot of study, it's good to have people in academia who have studied this stuff on your side, right? So they're looking for those who want to talk about this as well, who have that level of knowledge. And they're also looking for partnerships from different studios. And I think this kind of goes in a similar way to like the point of the main part of this episode, right? They're looking for studios that are like doing the equivalent of like when we talked about Marvelous USA last time. In part 2 of this, we talked about how the CEO basically said, hey, we think releasing physical media is better for us. We think it works better for players here, so that's what we're going to do. So in that same way, they're looking for studios who think, yeah, it's good to make sure that our games just kind of stay available and that we're not just getting rid of them needlessly. So they're looking for studios in the European Union like that. And I really liked this quote from the post that he had here, because I think it's a good statement for like the subject that we're covering, like the main topic today too. Quote, our fight is not against a united CEO front, it's against a handful of companies holding our favorite games hostage, end quote. Because remember, these are all like very disparate little groups, because we still see companies that put games out there and they're out on whatever platform for decades on end, and they're just available without any problems. And in the same way we're seeing with the key card situation, we're seeing studios still put games on the media because they think it's the right thing. It's just a disparate handful of like folks in big business who want to save a quick buck, like we kind of like we talked about with Capcom last night, and or not last time rather, and his not so great comment. And then on the final front, they want those in Europe to just keep talking about this. Talk to the governments, talk to consumer protections groups, talk to studios, because, you know, maybe individual people know of a studio or a consumer protection group that someone at the head of the initiative just isn't aware of, and it's good to get them in the know about this and keep things going.
Right. And we had a couple of announcements also this week in just, you know, recreational gaming, I would like to argue, with a new piece of hardware that came out from Steam. We have the new Steam machine, along with a new Steam controller and Steam Frame, which are their VR goggles. So, Brandon, you got some notes for exactly what all this is. I heard about the announcement, but I don't know too much on it. So what exactly are we looking at with
Right,
it?
So these aren't out yet. They were just revealed. Basically,
Yeah.
Valve is looking at building on the success that they've had so far with the Steam Deck, right? So this new Steam controller, it's not exactly like the one that came out, you know, geez, that has to be more than 10 years ago at this time, right? Like it's been a while since that original one came out with like the humongous trackpads on them that are also kind of like buttons. The new one, like the new controller, is basically like if you took a Steam Deck and chopped the screen out of the middle. You just made it a controller. The VR goggles, you know, pretty self-explanatory. They are, in fact, VR goggles. They all have their own individual features. I will link the trailer that I saw for this in the description so that you listeners can go take a look at that if you are so inclined and have not heard about it. The goggles come with their own motion controllers, but I think the big interesting one is the Steam machine itself. So, again, more than 10 years ago, Valve had to be doing these Steam machines, and they were basically like, hey, here are these special custom PCs that use the architect, like basically they're specially designed for Steam is the idea. And the big problem that they had with that was it wasn't one single machine. It was a lot of different individual little PCs that were classified as Steam machines. So in theory, it's supposed to be like, oh, it's kind of like a console, but it's also a computer at the same time. And, you know, if you're someone who wants to get into PC gaming, but you're not that knowledgeable about it yet, I'm sure that seeing that there's like dozens of options on the market and then there are all kinds of different prices didn't make that easy for you. Whereas with this, it's trying to make everything a little bit more unified. The Steam Deck is a machine with a couple different units. There's this one Steam controller, one Steam machine, and one official like Steam set of goggles. So, and pretty much everything like they try to like work across each other. So like you can use the controller with the goggles. You can obviously use the controller with the Steam machine. You can use the controller with the deck or just with a regular schmegular computer if you own your computer, right? My thing with it is I'm just curious to see where this goes, because my inclination is I think all three of these pieces of hardware are probably going to see about the same success as the Steam Deck. The one I would probably hedge on and think would probably have less success is the frame. That's the goggles again, because VR in general is just so more niche than, playing a game on a screen like we've been doing for 40 to 50 years now. I just get the feeling that these devices are going to have a very devoted cult following because, they're more or less limited to being sold through on Steam. And to be clear, when I say that I think it's going to have a cult following, that doesn't mean they're bad. The reality is just like it's going to have a limited audience because you have to already have Steam downloaded on your computer, which is that's not a giant barrier to entry, but it's like you have to know about that. You have to know that they do hardware, and then the bigger question with it is going to be the price, right? If this were sold at retail, kind of like we talked about with Tomb Raider last time, there's probably going to be a handful of people who would just pick it up because they see it and they're like, oh, that's neat, and I would like, oh, it's an easy way to get into PC gaming. But that also might be a problem if the price ends up being like way too much compared to what people are willing to pay. But we don't know what the price is on any of this stuff yet, so I think that's something that we're going to have to revisit later on. I did see an article yesterday speculating that based on like pricing out the components for the Steam machine, that they would think it would be about a $500 device. So if that's the case, that's a pretty darn good price, in this market. It's certainly not anything that's way over the top right now, but that's something that, again, we'll have to confirm as time goes on. So that's kind of where I stand. I think the audience that wants it is really going to want it. I think it's going to do really, really well for them. But I don't think, much like how, like, everyone made this argument for a period. Okay, I shouldn't say everyone. There was a small group of people who were like, oh, the Steam Deck's going to be like the Switch killer. And it's like, that's just not realistic because of the barrier that you have to get it through Steam. And it's more expensive. Like, for the market it's made for, it's perfect. Is it made for like the general market? The sales suggest that it's not, and that's okay. Not everything is meant to be this thing that like takes over the world, and it's sometimes things are just made to serve the audience that it's made for.
Yeah, and I think something else to kind of keep in mind too is like we have very limited info right now for everything on it, which particularly the price is going to be kind of the, where is that going to put it at? Because I've seen some stuff where like people are joking, it's like, oh, this is going to be the Sony and Xbox killer. I'm like, I don't know. Microsoft's already been kind of shooting themselves in the foot lately. I don't think they need the extra push. And then Sony has been kind of the powerhouse alongside Nintendo for how long now? It's like, if anything, they're going to find a way to like just make sure that they stay relevant on why they need to be doing that stuff. Probably means that like they might remove the exclusivities that they put on Steam and just keep them on Sony. That's probably their easiest plan of action. But at some point when we have more info on a lot of this stuff and kind of know more about everything with it, I'm sure we'll probably devote a full episode to it. But since this got announced, we wanted to make sure that at least it was brought up.
Yeah, it's light information right now, but as you can imagine, anytime that someone new is trying to enter the hardware sort of space like this and is a more, I hesitate to use the phrase like legitimate contender, but it's just like they have a more realistic chance of success. It's something worth looking at. And who knows, we could look at this and see that every single time there's a listing put up on Steam for all these devices that they just sell out insanely, and then Valve is like, oh, maybe we should put this at retail, and then it just ends up taking off, and like there's a very realistic chance of that happening as well. Like we don't know yet, but my suspicion, kind of like yours, is just like, you know, it's kind of got a limited audience just because you can only get it through Steam, and you need to have like all that knowledge that goes into it.
True, but I also think that there is the case that can be made where it's going to talk a little bit about maybe that this does help people get into PC gaming. Like, if we really boil it down, it's like outside of like certain companies that you would require to like download their launcher and stuff like that, Steam pretty much you could just get a bunch of stuff and then put those on there, and now you have basically a console that's a computer to a TV. I don't think, it's not saying that this isn't possible to get more people into the Steam market that weren't previously on it. But that also, again, like we've said, it requires a lot more like info before we start making really heavy guesses. My initial gut punch reaction is thinking that it's not going to affect the console wars as massively as like people are making it out to be, but I do think it changes one of the key players in the 3-horse race that we've been so used to, because I think Steam might actually boot out Xbox and make them kind of only relevant as like a game developer if they're still making games at that point. But that's my gut punch reaction. I don't know if it's true, I don't know if it'll happen, but between what Microsoft has been doing lately with their whole gaming division and now this announcement with Steam basically saying, hey, we're in the sphere now, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Xbox kind of become like a Sega, essentially, where it's like they get out of the console wars, but they still remain relevant as a developer of some type. But I don't know. I'll dive more on it in a different episode, but that's what I'm thinking personally.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that I'd wanted to do this year that we just never got around to because we've lost time and worked on long stuff like this. But like, Xbox is in a weird space. Yeah, and the holidays now coming up. It's just it can never be easy. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know that I'm quite there yet. Except then I start thinking about when I start putting everything together, like you said, and it's like I could be persuaded to your point. I want to see how things develop first before we make any more concrete, like this is definitely what's going to happen. As for things that are a little bit more concrete, I know you're very excited by some news that came out yesterday regarding the Game of the Year nominations.
So they finally announced all the categories for the Game Awards for the 2025 Game of the Year show that's coming out probably in, I would assume, a few weeks. Like sometime, I would assume, in December, right? I don't actually know when it is. Oh, sorry, hang on. I just found it. December 11th is when the awards will be this year. So we might see if we can sneak one more episode in, maybe do some precursor picks, or maybe we'll do one after, kind of talking about the winners. But the big ones that I kind of wanted to talk about specifically were the Game of the Year nods, as well as a couple other categories, or not a couple of categories, but like, hold on, words. Okay. So, Game of the Year nominations, pretty much I think 5 of the 6 that got announced were kind of expected. The big names being Clair Obscura Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2, Donkey Kong Bonanza, the sole Nintendo rep in this category, Hades 2, which I'm personally stoked about, Hollow Knight Silksong, and then the 6th one is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I don't know too much on that. I've heard people talk great about Kingdom Come, but I don't know anything about that franchise. But literally, like, Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2, Donkey Kong Bonanza, kind of being Nintendo's big game of the year, I feel like. And then Hades 2 and Hollow Knight Silksong, which finally is released this year. I'm going to be honest, this is kind of a stacked list. Like, this is heavy competition.
Yeah, when I look at it, I have to agree. By and large, I'm not surprised because, I mean, geez, how many people did you see who were super duper stoked about Claire Obscura? It was weird for me because, like, I mean, I guess appropriate to its name, Obscura, right? It kind of came out of nowhere to me. Like, clearly the people that were interested in it were really super into it, but if you didn't know it was coming, it just kind of came out of nowhere, and now it's on track to potentially be Game of the Year. Silk Song, people really, really adored the original Hollow Knight, so the fact that, and not to mention, Silk Song was just like in demand for years and years and years and years and years and years and years with its extended development cycle, so the fact that it's gotten up there doesn't entirely surprise me. Kingdom Come is kind of the weird one, in that you're right. It's similar in that if you know about it, you're probably very into it, but if you're not following it perfectly, like in super extreme detail, you might not even know that it was an option out there. I am trying to pull up the website right now to look at these because I want to like actually like physically look at them myself, and man, I don't know if it's just my phone or whatever, but the Game Awards website is terrible at loading.
That's why I'm on the Polygon website, because that was the quickest one I could get into.
Yeah, I mean, to no one's surprise, the one that I know the best is Bonanza. I'll be honest, that does surprise me a little bit, because I would agree. Like, I think unless Nintendo's had a year of just like really boring games, they're kind of sort of a shoe-in to get one title in there. But I would think conventionally, I would think it would be Mario Kart World that is the one in there, because who doesn't dislike Mario Kart? Well, apparently a bunch of people with this particular entry.
So here's my take on this. I think part of it is because, like, the Switch 2, if we're being completely honest, there's maybe a handful of titles for that console right now that are new. Like, and that actually stick out as new titles versus, like, how many of the games on the Switch 2 library right now are basically, we've got improved versions of the Switch 1 version. For me, I think Bonanza is arguably the better game between that and Mario Kart World, and I only say that
I would agree.
Because of the fact that, like, Mario Kart, yes, is popular enough, but I think there's also that stigma that Mario Kart World kind of, I don't know why, has been kind of getting with it since its release, of, like, it's just not quite the same as, like, how Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was for, like, the longest time, which basically was the Mario Kart for close to a decade at that point. So I think it was kind of getting judged heavily from its predecessor. But I think also Bonanza, just in terms of Nintendo's most recent releases, is the best game by far in terms of what it is, what it does. It's different enough that it is an interesting game, and I do think it warrants being on the list for Game of the Year. But, like, we came out this year with so many bangers of games, it's not even funny. Like, the fact there's only 6 is astonishing. I would not have been surprised if there was at minimum 10 nominees with, like, how many good games came out this year. Because, like, I'm looking kind of and scrolling through some of these other games that definitely could have been on there. Ghost of Yotei, Split Fiction, Silent Hill F. There are plenty of really amazing games that are in this. And the funniest thing is that there is, like, so many nominations for Expedition 33, too, on top of it all. They have had the most nominations of any Game Awards ever with their game. I am not expecting them to sweep by any stretch of the imagination, but I will be honest, I'm almost willing to say that if they get 6, that's almost for sure. And I am looking at some of the titles, and I'm like, oh, this is absolutely going to be no contest. Game of the Year is, I think, going to be a hard one. I don't know for sure they're going to win that one, but that would be my pick between that and Hades 2. But that's aside the point. And then, like, other ones that they're part of: Best Art Direction, Best Audio Direction, Best Game Direction, Best Narrative. They have 3 nominees for Best Performance between Jennifer English, Ben Starr, and Charlie Cox. They're all in this one category. They have a 50% shot for this, which is wild. best score in music. Like, it's insane how many that they actually have. And even best independent game. That is like a lock for them at that point. Because, like, aside from, like, Hades 2 and Hollow Knight, it's like if they don't win Game of the Year, they're probably going to win that one. And they could end up winning both.
Not just best indie game, also best debut indie game.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't get best indie game, they're getting best debut for sure.
Yeah, and, like, best debut indie game is also a very, like, decent list too, but, like, by comparison, it's going to be an interesting, like, situation. A lot of people are already saying, like, this is going to be a repeat of Baldur's Gate 3, where it's like it's just going to clean house. And I'm like, I'm not saying that you're wrong. I just don't know if it's, like, as much as I think that we're expecting it to be. But I do hope that at minimum 6 will get them for sure. Because, like, for me personally, in the debut indie game, like, ones, I'm picking Dispatch personally because I just finished the game. It finally, like, fully released. And I will be honest, that story was incredible as well for me. It's not saying Expedition 33 is not a good story. I think it's phenomenal too. But, like, Dispatch, like, there's a grounded realness into that game that made that story just flow so good. And, like, for $30, I'm like, I would have paid $60 for this game. And I will be honest about that. And I'm already looking forward to it because they already sound like they're trying to plan ahead for multiple more Dispatch games too. Because, like, for a game that also, like, they have some underestimated star power in Dispatch, and I'll sing its praises all day. So I'll wrap it up with this. But, like, Aaron Paul was really amazing as the main character. Laura Bailey, Travis Willingham, freaking Moist Critical and Jacksepticeye and Young Gravy are all in this, and they all did incredibly well as their voice characters. Dispatch is highly slept on in terms of, like, the list of games that are out there, but, like, every person that I have seen talk about Dispatch is singing its praises. And the funniest thing of all of it for me is the fact that it's like, this is a game that, like, it's essentially a resurgence of the Telltale style of game. So, like, Ad Hoc Studio, the guys who made it, are former Telltale devs. So hopefully with the success of it, because I think they said after, like, what was it, a week or 10 days or something like that, they sold 1 million copies of the game already. This game's got a following, a very heavy following, but, like, I don't know, I think it deserves a little bit of love, even if it doesn't, like, have, 700 nominations at the Game Awards. It's like, I'd personally take it for indie, because let's be honest, I would not be surprised Expedition 33 getting, best independent game, because Dispatch isn't anywhere in that category either. But there were a lot of great indie games too. But that's my take on the Game Awards this year. I have been just stoked to see what happens with all this.
Yeah, I think looking at this, I don't really have a ton more to comment on. I'm curious to see how it goes. Realistically, I could see any of these titles being legitimate Game of the Year contenders. I would be surprised if Clair Obscur doesn't win it, because it was just like a gigantic sensation. But I think a lot of the categories where these other games appear, they're likely going to win it. Like, I see if Bonanza doesn't get Game of the Year, which, like, oh my god, if that gets Game of the Year, like, that would be a humongous upset.
With, like, I'd say that's, like, 5th on that list, and I only say that because I don't know anything about Kingdom Come Deliverance.
Right, but I think it's guaranteed, or I guess I should say, I think it's all but guaranteed to get best family game. Although there's good options on there, and that's another one where it's like I would be inclined to pick Mario Kart World for best family game, but it's also in best sports/racing game, and I think it's a bigger shoe-in for that.
I'll be honest, I almost think Family Game's going to go to Sonic Racing, because, like, I feel like that's arguably the better racing game that came out this year, but that is a very hot take, I feel like.
I think it's possible, but, there's a lot to go into with any of these. I just tend to think my bigger problem with the whole entire situation here is I just don't know, in the grand scheme of things, how much some of this matters, because the Game Awards, it started as a really good idea, but then it's slowly over time morphed more and more into trailer, ad. Oh, we have an award, and the person walks up on stage, and they're given like 10 seconds, then they need to walk back. Like, if we knew for sure there was going to be a greater shot of this being like closer to a more traditional awards show, in that like the folks who are making these were really, really recognized for it, I would feel better about it. But right now I'm just like, we'll just kind of see what happens, and then we'll talk about it. But, you know, maybe that's just me. You know, maybe I'm just a terrible, horrible cynic in this. Last sort of intro-y thing here, but it dovetails nicely into the main topic. So in episode 48, last time that is, we talked about what I consider to be like, or at least what we would in general consider to be like, the publishers are doing this best, kind of like schizophrenic, like what the heck, this doesn't make any sense, and the ones who are doing like this terribly. Well, now we need to amend the rankings a little bit, because we now have our first Nintendo published game key card title. Boo! And it is this new Pokemon spin-off game, this Pokemon Pokopia game. Are you familiar with it at all? Did you read anything about it?
I actually don't know anything about it. I think the only thing I saw something about it was, I want to say that I saw like, what was it, a ghost Pikachu or something like that?
Yep, that information came out about it this week too.
Yeah.
That like, oh, they have like some variants of different Pokemon, including a Pikachu in there. Kind of the way I would describe it from what I saw is, it's like if you had Animal Crossing and Minecraft, but with like a Pokemon coat of paint over it. That might be selling it short. Obviously, the game hasn't come out, so who knows? It could be amazing, but if I had to like give you a bird's eye view of what it is, that's how I would describe it. And on something like this, I have complicated thoughts as always, because it can never just be simply, this is bad, screw it, or this is good, support it. When I saw this announced, I didn't really think this game had a shot of even having a physical release. I thought for sure it was going to be like a high-end download-only game, so the fact that this is happening at all kind of surprised me. It's also hard for me to like be like as upset compared to some of the other titles we talked about last time, because in the grand scheme of things, this is like a smaller title. I mean, it is quite literally, I would argue, Pokemon's equivalent to Dragon Quest Builders, but because like, you know, this is a Pokemon game, but like, this isn't Legend ZA. This isn't whatever the next pairing, you know, this isn't Pokemon Fork and Spoon, right? Or whatever their next dual release is going to be. This is some smaller game, so it's hard for me to get like completely bent out of shape with it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's Pokemon, it's cool, it's whatever. But it's like, it's like kind of how you said, it's hard to be stoked for something that you like are sitting there and it's like, okay, did we need it though? And it's like, but to be fair, Pokemon has had, you know, how many types of spin-offs that they've done in the past, like, and some of them have gone on to be very successful, like the Mystery Dungeon series. But it is definitely kind of disappointing seeing a Nintendo published game on a game key card, considering like this is still very new technology in the space, and it's like, I don't know if I feel good about it. Like, I understand it from like the not first party published, excuse me, but like, it's just so like, it's getting to this point now where it feels like it's like, oh, well, now we maybe just don't care about what we're trying to do. It's like, but you should. That's part of the reason, like, I kind of hate that we kind of went off of like disc formats basically for Nintendo, like, because at least disc, it's like, it's kind of hard to, you know, do the key card option with a disc.
We'll get to that, because remember, the main topic of this episode is there hope? And we need to cover where PlayStation and Xbox fit into this whole thing, because I would disagree, actually. It is easier than you think. The way I kind of...
I was going to say, it's also easy to mod a Nintendo 3DS, but...
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, the way I kind of describe it, like in my notes here, like, even if I don't feel like I need to get bent out of shape out of this particular release, it's just, I think it's supremely disappointing that any game like this exists at all, right? We talked about you're the company making the hardware. The least you can do, if you're going to have this piece of hardware that has a card reader on it, put your games on the media that it uses. Now, I do suspect, like, the game is small. It's 10 gigabytes. We talked about how there's only 64 gigabyte cartridges as far as we know. And we talked about how it's like these cartridges are much more expensive than discs because discs have been produced, like Blu-rays are 20 years old now, so it's a pretty cheap format to make, let alone CDs and DVDs and all that stuff. So, when I put those together, I just start to think like, okay, it was probably tough to find a Goldilocks price where a proper physical made sense. But at that point, that's when I go to, why isn't this a high-end download-only game, right? Why isn't this a $40 download game? Because that's probably like a more Goldilocks price to where you'll get, the people who want to play it for sure would pick it up, and then the people who might not be as interested, but are like, oh, I could use a budget game, like that would be what they want. Really, my bigger problem with this now is, like, when I first wrote my initial notes on this, we didn't have a price. Now we have a price, and it is retailing at a full $70. So if this isn't going to be a budget release for physical, too, which to me, that's like $30. I could be persuaded, like I said, to $40, but like for me, true budget is like $30.
Like half of a regular full first-party release.
Yes. To me, that's the offsetting factor here, right? There are other full-price game key card games out there. FIFA, or I guess it's not FIFA, it's EA Sports Football Club, Wait. Madden, those are all full price, right? But if I had to put everything together, it's a first-party published game, and we want to release it at full retail price. Those two factors outweigh that it's small in size and that maybe there's no Goldilocks price, So to me, the choice ends up being kind of like this is a moral and a business decision, because where I think, like I said, I think there's going to be more people who would be okay with the game being on a key card if it were a budget title. Now that it's like both not on the media and it's full price, from a business side, it's like you're gonna turn off people, and it's just the wrong thing to do. So disappointed. We'll see. We'll have to see what keeps happening in the future, because we haven't seen this come out with games like Mario Tennis Fever yet. We haven't. Obviously, Hyrule Warriors just came out. That one's on the cartridge. So I think, I remember talking about this when we first saw these being revealed, and I was like, if this were, like, for first-party stuff, if this were something like Tetris 99, where it's like, oh, it's free with NSO, and it's just like, oh, the physical's kind of a nice bonus option, that I wouldn't care if it's a key card. But even this, when it's like a spin-off that I didn't expect to get a physical release, like, if you're not going to go the whole 9 yards with it, like, I don't get why you're bothering to do it all. But in terms of, like, if I were advising someone on what they should do on the purchasing side, like, to me, it just kind of stays the same as what we talked about last time. If you want it, download it when it's on sale, or this is a great opportunity to support your local game shops, right? If you see a copy at a local game shop, give them the money. They're the only ones who make the money off of it anyway, because it's used. They bought it from the person who bought it. So that's where I kind of land on this. But still, regardless, very, very sad.
But anyway, we're back to part 3 and closing in on 40 minutes, finally getting to the main topic.
Yeah, we're probably looking at 90 minutes for this, knowing us, if I just had to take a stab in the dark here.
No, never. We've never done a long episode like this. Never.
Last time didn't end up being 2 hours on the dot after I cut everything down. No.
Never long.
Nope. Okay. So, very bright, cheery topic. Is there hope? It's tough to say, I think, if there is hope in terms of, will we see, as time goes on, games lead more toward, hey, we're going to put this on the media, or we're going to go more toward everything is going to be a key card or a download only. The speculation was that the prevalence of key cards has to do a lot more with their size. We saw that the Sonic Racing Cross Worlds FAQ lists it at 64 gigabytes, so assuming that, like, that is in fact the size, with many releases right now that are ending up smaller than 64 gigabytes, including the one we just talked about, it just might not make sense for a publisher to put a game on a cartridge if it's only using like a third of the space or a sixth of the space or even less than that, right? We talked about how the cartridges are claimed to be $23 in cost, right? And that wouldn't be surprising. But I do think there are important questions to ask with things like that, like, why is writing the game to the cartridge so much more expensive than these sort of like dummy carts? They still have electrical connectors in there, so I
have to assume that the key card is like slightly different materials or something, where it's like they can maybe make them cheaper than if they do them like with the quality first party stuff. And I'm using quality loosely because I don't know exactly how sturdy and how usable and all that jazz they are, but like I gotta feel like it's a cost-cutting thing. Like there's no way it isn't, right?
Oh, it's absolutely a cost-cutting thing for a lot of these, but like we talked about, there's also some games where they're going for this because of, you know, the fact that you're forced to install, like you're forced to download it means you're going to have faster load times, right? But I think for a lot of publishers, it just comes down to like, hey, we don't want to spend as much. So I don't know, like, if it has anything to do with the chip or lack thereof or how exactly that works. But, you know, does this mean like, hey, if we can get smaller cartridges, you know, less than 64 gigabytes, if we can get a 32 or a 16 or whatever for these smaller games, is that going to cause publishers to create more true physical releases or not? We don't know. It's hard to say at this point, which kind of leads into one of the pieces that could bring some hope, because so far the actual physical games have been only made by this semiconductor manufacturer ROHM. That's ROHM. They also help in making Switch 1 cartridges, but there's also more manufacturers who make Switch 1 cartridges other than just ROHM, like this company called Macronix. It's Macronix. And I bring them up because there's some recent information about them that could be helpful. The other problem with it, though, is it could also be nothing because it's based on a rumor, and we know how much I love working off of rumors based on an earlier episode from this year. Supposedly, allegedly, in Macronix's quarterly earnings report from August, they said they're going to be using what they call MLC NAND and 3D NAND to meet varying capacity requirements on their storage media like this. So if that doesn't make any sense to you whatsoever, don't worry. Much like last time when we talked about technical stuff, this kind of flies over our heads too. But like the long and short of it is like they're going to use other technology to make sure that there are going to be options out there for these cartridges other than just 64 gigabytes. But that's not just like smaller, that also means bigger, which doesn't necessarily solve the load time problem. Now, it'd be nice to have bigger cartridges because, for example, Final Fantasy VII Remake couldn't fit on a 64 gigabyte cartridge even if they wanted to because it's a 90 gigabyte game. So it'd be nice for that, but if their problem is the load times, that doesn't seem like it would change the outcome in terms of what media Final Fantasy VII Remake would be released on for the Switch 2.
And it's hard, too, because it's like performance becomes a very big factor when it comes to, I think, these key cards and all this jazz. But, like, it sucks because it's like you don't feel like you own it fully, I feel like, with a key card. I think I talked about it on one of the previous episodes when we talked about it.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to see how this plays out because I think that could be a big piece of the puzzle to solving all these problems. If we need smaller, cheaper cartridges, and those are being made, that's hopeful. If these are mostly resulting in bigger cards and it's not doing anything to address the loading problem, it doesn't much matter. to me, that also kind of gets a small piece to a, like a very itty bitty teeny tiny piece in Nintendo's defense, which is like, if they're being squeezed in terms of there's just not smaller, cheaper cartridges, there's nothing they can do about that. You know, it's literally out of their control. It'd be nice if it were in their control, and there is something to be said for, like you talked about, well, it'd be nice to stick around with discs. They can't do this form factor of a system if they do discs, though, right? You can't fit a disk drive in a... I mean, you could, but it would make this thing really bulky and massive and not, fit the point of being a portable device. I think another thing to consider, too, is this interesting quote from... Bringing up again, this is like the second or third time in this episode, the head of Marvelous USA. Remember... how he talked about, like, hey, these are kind of the right choice. I read in that interview that I linked in the previous episode, which I can link it again in a document here too. He said, quote, "It's been very rewarding to see our titles mentioned as games fans intend to purchase on Switch 2 since they know we went with the full ROM game cards. It was not an easy decision as it had to be made many months ago when things were very uncertain and we were still learning about how the game keycard option worked." End quote. That's basically what he's saying is it's like, hey, we're getting positive reinforcement here. We'll probably keep doing this because it's nice to see that people want to buy our games specifically because they're on the media. Now, he does also mention in that interview that yeah, we're going to need to actually look at the final sales and see if there really and truly is a connection between the sales and the physical releases here. But to me, that gets to the next piece of if there's hope. If there's going to be hope, consumers need to play a role in making that happen.
And I think that's something that we've, I think, brought up multiple times. And when it really comes down to when companies need to hear the voice of the consumers, the best way and the quickest way to make them listen is with your wallet. Because if you are not buying their products, you are making them realize, hey, this was a bad idea. I hate that it only comes down to the dollars and cents at the end of the day when it comes to it. But honestly, it is the best case that you can do for something like that. So it's if at some point, maybe there is some, probably by next year even, where we get some actual info, be like, okay, so how many actual copies of these games are they selling on key cards versus actual cartridges with the games on them? And if it's noticeable, yeah, if you put them on the cartridges, you're going to, sell exponentially better. Then that probably will give them more incentive to be like, okay, maybe we veer away from the key card option unless it's absolutely necessary. I don't think it's inherently a bad idea if you need something to kind of help with getting the information of a game if it's too big. There is a good side to key cards. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, this is the worst piece of media, even if I probably already did at some point in the last two episodes. I'm probably sure I did. But anything made can be used for a good purpose. It comes down to what the creator and the people that it's being used for use it for. So I'm not saying you can't have a spot for key cards where it's kind of necessary, but you are also adding to a problem that didn't need to be added in the first place. I've definitely said in the previous episode, either part 1 or part 2, having them not physically be on the cartridge at the start when you buy it and requiring you an internet connection for it sucks. That part sucks. But if it's okay, but it lets you play big games that you normally probably wouldn't be able to fit onto a cartridge, okay, that's a little bit more understandable because you have limited capacity. That said, I don't know why you're making limited capacity cartridges, but, I could at least let it pass. But that being said, we're in a position right now where there's not enough info still. Even we're pushing, month 5 of the Switch 2's release?
Yep, 5 months in since June.
And right now, it just doesn't feel like how it was with the Switch when the first Switch came out. I don't know if that's just me. I just feel like this was just kind of a tech upgrade more than anything. And I haven't seen it be a reason that oh, you need to go get a Switch 2. Aside from the fact that you can't play Mario Kart World or Donkey Kong Bonanza. And if my Switch 1 can still run a game fairly decently, I don't know if I need a Switch 2, if I'm being honest. It's nice that they're giving certain Switch 1 upgrades. Like, I give that. I think that's a very valiant option. But then that also raises the questions, like, why didn't this just work first place, you know, where it was when we bought it? Like, Scarlet and Violet being the best example from recent years. Like, that game runs phenomenally on the Switch 2 now, after the upgrade. Why didn't it when you first released the game? But I digress.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to dig into there in general, like, but just like, oh, on the Pokemon thing, like Game Freak and the rushed development and all that stuff and all the problems that has. In terms of like like you're talking about with the capacities, I talked about like Rome is a semiconductor maker. How much of this too is maybe the technology does exist, but there's bigger, more important contracts that they need to fulfill those smaller capacities for. And even then, we've had a problem over the last handful of years that semiconductors are kind of hard to get right now because they're being used in all kinds of devices. So what's going to fall to the back burner other than a video game system like this, right? But I also, like, I think it is true. I think there's this weird situation here in that I think you're right. There's not a ton of people who maybe are going to be as invested in getting Switch 2 yet. On the other hand, the sales also just came out for like the first time where they have to report these. They've already sold 10 million units in 5 months. So those two realities don't necessarily purport with each other, but you know,
But I also think that there is like a very heavy influence on like correlation and causation sometimes kind of get misconstrued. It's like, yes, Switch 2 has sold 10 million like units, but also we're kind of keep in mind too that like in a realistic standpoint, how many of those could also be qualified as, hey, I bought a Switch 2 because this is a better performing machine, so I didn't need my Switch 1 anymore, but I kept all my Switch 1 games. It may not have actually sold a lot more of certain games, like newer titles, but it may also be like they're just kind of looking at it as like, you know, from like the base Switch to like, what was it, the OLED, to now the Switch 2. So I think that could also be kind of skewing the numbers in that aspect a little bit, because I'm not saying it's like a lot of them, but there's definitely a percentage who probably just looked at the Switch 2 and said, oh cool, I can just use this instead of my regular Switch, and then once they sold their original Switch back to, you know, whatever they sold it to, you have a better functioning Switch now, so you don't have to even get rid of your games for that, so you're probably still plugging through your Switch 1 library. And right now, the first party titles, at least for Switch 2, haven't exactly been like a lot. Like, yeah, we have, you know, Bonanza and Mario Kart World, which are two of the arguably best ones that came out, but like, I'm gonna be honest, we're in November. Outside of maybe Legends EA, I don't really know how many other Switch 2 titles that like Nintendo has put out that I'm like, oh, I can't wait to go play that. It's like, okay, I don't know what else I really am aiming to get here, but alright.
Yeah, I definitely think right now they have more, like Mario Kart is the big system seller. Bonanza is an exciting title for a lot of people, but also it's kind of a cult game in that way too. Kirby Air Riders is definitely a game where you're like,
oh my god, I forgot that
you're either going to be really into it or you're
out.
going to be really not into it. And then the same kind of thing for Hyrule Warriors. It's a game that you're either going to be like, I really want to play it, or you're going to be like a yawn. But who knows? We'll have to see what happens in 2026. But yeah, I mean, just like trying to compare this to 2017 is a fool's errand, because there you had like what? Breath of the Wild, Splatoon 2, Mario Odyssey, Xenoblade Chronicles, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which, I mean, that's also another thing, though, that makes it a little bit harder to compare this to the original Switch, is its library, for sure, in those first couple of years, were kind of bolstered by, hey, we're going to do these Wii U ports because we want to make money on these games, whereas those are pretty much all already out in terms of the ones that people care about, so they can't do that again. So now it's pretty much all original titles that need to take up that release space. So Yeah.
Yeah, and if Nintendo doesn't release more through the course of at least the next year or two, it's like I feel like this is kind of a weird release for them. I'm not saying it's at Virtual Boy levels of failure, but like I feel a little Wii U failure kind of on the horizon if they don't start getting better titles out for first party stuff.
I think it's going to be a slow burn, but yeah, we'll just see what happens.
Like the hype was high at the beginning, and then it just sort of like is slowly dropping down. It feels like right now, and it's like it's not going to be noticeable until like I would say maybe year 3, year 4, where it's like, hey, what's going on here?
Yeah, but there's also a lot of conflicting factors that we can't look at yet until we get to that point. Anyway, back on track in terms of the main topic before we turn this into yet another discussion on like the future of this system as a whole, because we certainly want to do that, right? I think it's both the solutions here are both A, they need to be not these game key cards need to be not selling as well, but also the publishers need to know I am not buying this because it's on this media. I did not buy Pac-Man World 2 because, well, I want the game on the cartridge. Simple as that, right? I did not buy Bravely Default because I want to own it on the media. Same thing, though, with the other approaches that I've listed here, right? Like, I only got this at a local shop because I didn't want to give you guys money for it because you put it on this media that I don't care for as much. Oh, I bought this on sale because I am mad that this is on a key card as opposed to actually being on the media. So I made sure specifically to give you guys less money for it. These two, like, it's not just as simple as simply not purchasing the game. There needs to be, the link needs to be made between these aren't selling because they're on this media, right? And that could be, like, a lot of times you'll see companies will do surveys for their games, like, hey, take our survey on this and we'll send you, like, when you get to the end of it, you can have a wallpaper for the game. Take this survey on this and we'll give you, like, points to our reward program or whatever. That's a perfect space because they're specifically looking for feedback to mention, I didn't buy this for the fact that it's not on the media. And you can literally do that if you want on like social media posts too, but I also know people can have a penchant to go over the top on social media. So if you're going to do that, like, don't turn it up to 11, turn it up to like, a 6. Be reasonable when you're talking about this. Don't be like a complete, frothing at the mouth, crazy person, because that's not going to get the message across. It's going to make you seem like you're just a lunatic. And you can even mention stuff like we've talked about where it's like, I would accept if the Switch 2 edition, if you did it like that, if it were a code in a box, because I can just upgrade my physical Switch 1 copy. Like, that's what I'm saying is like, be reasonable with it. Time. Notice how the Marvelous USA guy talked about, hey, we need to figure this out way in advance of time. This could be a piece of whether there is hope or not, is, publishers were all making these decisions earlier on based on like, okay, well, we don't know a ton about the console yet. We don't know a ton about this media yet. So we're going to go with this because we think it'll be fine. And now that there's been time to see how people react to the media, maybe they'll make a different decision. I will say, based on comments like our fine Capcom guy last time, that maybe that's not gonna be the same. Maybe this won't end up being true, but now that there is time, like, if we're making decisions right now for like 2026 and 2027 releases, maybe we'll see things change. It's just kind of up in the air. I also think, though, on this, it could maybe make an interesting case in some of these games that ended up having like separate Switch 1 and 2 releases that could have had Switch 2 editions. Maybe we'll see some come back and they'll decide like the options will open up more and they'll be allowed to do upgrades for those games. Maybe we'll see some where it's like, oh, hey, the cost of this has come down to make it. Let's re-release this game that came out earlier on a key card, on an actual cartridge. We just don't know yet. Time really is like going to be a major factor in this situation.
Sure. Like, it's definitely going to be a wait and see approach, I think, at this point.
The final complication to this, and I've alluded to it many times between part 1, 2, and 3. How does this issue apply to other platforms? Does it apply to other platforms at all? And, contrary, I think, to what the last, at this point, the recording on here is about an hour 5, so about an hour or so for the first episode, and our 2 hours. So about 4 hours that we spent talking on this because we're just absolute mad people. Contrary to that, you could make the case that the physical game situation is still best on Switch 2. PS5 is very, very close, like a super extremely close second. And the only reason that I say that is the distinction being Switch 2 is the only platform of the 3 big consoles that has physical releases where the media is being read as it's being played. When you put your cartridge in for a game, you don't have to install it. In the case of PS5, all your games need to be installed to the console's SSD. So you have the game on the media, but you still have to take up the space of the storage on the system to play it because it needs to take advantage of the fast load times the SSDs allow. If it were playing off the media, it would be going so much more slowly because it's going based on the read speed of the disk drive. So that's why I say they're a close second. If you don't care about that, then that's absolutely the best platform out there, in my opinion. Like, if that's what you want, that's what I would go for, right? But it's just kind of weird. It exists in this weird middle ground because it's like it is a physical game, but it's also like a key card, and that you're not reading the game off the disc. All you're really doing with the disc is the same thing you would do with the key card. It's in the system to prove you own the game. So you see why I say they're a little bit closer than maybe we would think at first glance? It like kind of functionally acts the same, even though it's on the media. It's just a weird spot. And I mean, that's pretty much the very first thing that happens with PS5 games. They even talk about it, like there's a whole article on here about how to play PlayStation games on disc on their American website. You put your game in the disc slot, it installs automatically the first time you play it. It is not you put it in and you play the game, because that's not what's happening with it. Xbox is kind of the weirder situation, though, because I swear I cannot find a clear answer to this question in terms of how games are written to the disc or not. Because a lot of folks have seemed to notice with, like, Xbox Series X games. I mean, I see a post here that goes back like 4 years ago. I got my Series X today, and I noticed that with some of the games I've tried, there's like some data on them, but like I need to download 50 to 80 gigabytes of games, like of data to play the game when I put the disc in. And so some people have claimed, because part of like one of the big deals with the Series X was this whole smart delivery thing. Remember when they were touting that before it came out? Basically what that was hey, this will be the same disc, but we'll install the best version of the game to your system. And the way that would work could only work if only the Xbox One version of a game is installed to the disc. But more or less it has like a line on it or something that says, hey, you're on a Series X, so we'll give you that version. Which means the Series X game is not on the disc. What is it functionally? It is a check to make sure you own the game yet again. I mean, technically it's on the media, and regardless, it's being installed, so it has that same PlayStation problem, but it's just not quite the same. There are a handful of games that are like native Xbox Series X titles, and those appear to be on larger discs, so that has helped it be the case. Like, basically, those are closer in nature to the PS5 discs. And a website that I want to plug here, because I think it'll be very helpful in terms of how people look at these or like be able to like make some decisions on this, is this website called doesitplay.org. Have you heard about them at all?
No, I actually haven't.
Okay, well, go to this website because I think you'll find it pretty neat. In fact, here, let me give you the link to it in our call here. Basically, what they do is they, go through, like, they have volunteers and they check if games can be played completely offline. If they don't need any downloads, if they, can be played without connecting to the internet, and they give you this handy little chart here that shows which ones do and don't allow for that. So, like, if I go to, like, and that's kind of the problem with this list a little bit, is some systems definitely have, like, way more games checked than others. Like, PS5 has 635 results for games. PS4 has, if it loads, 1,170. But then I go to Xbox Series X, 60 games. If I go to Switch 2, now granted, Switch 2 doesn't have that many games right now, 12 games. 12 games. That is not enough to make a very good judgment on how these work. But they're basically gonna, you can kind of use this as a resource to figure out with these, if I put the disc in, am I going to be able to play it? Am I going to be able to do this without any problems? You might still have to do an install, but is this like game completely legitimate? Like, shocker, EA Sports Football Club's 26 on Series X and Xbox One cannot be played offline, and a download is required for it.
Wild. I mean, I am impressed, honestly, with like how high the offline play statistic is. Like, just off of getting onto the website here, like 94% right now.
Yeah.
It is fun. Like, what does the yes and no in the yellow mean exactly?
So in the methodology page, they talk about, so for offline play, if it's like the yellow yes with an asterisk, the game is mainly online focused, but it has some offline functionality. So, like, basically they're saying, hey, this is a game that you're pretty much playing it to play online, but technically it has, like, some offline bot modes. Or similarly, like hey, the game is generally enjoyable offline, but there's going to be a handful of features that require an online connection, like some unlockables, trophies, leaderboards. Like, I bet if I were to type in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, it's probably considered to be like, oh no, I guess not. It says it has it as green offline play and green for download required. But I thought for sure it would be considered a yellow on here because of like the leaderboards and all that stuff. But maybe they don't consider that to be that important because you can just play it offline. Whereas the red ones are like straight up, nope. Online only, you need to have an internet connection, requires a login to a certain account, or like you need to have a profile like on PSN or Xbox Live. As for on the download required side, the yellow one, the yellow no is like, hey, it's mostly on the media, but like, so like it's on there, but there are bugs that are like huge and crazy and ridiculous, but so like would be nice to have an update for that. Or it mentions, hey, there's missing minor content outside of the base game. So like they use the example, small amounts of bonus characters in fighting games or a couple tracks in some racing games, but experiencing the core game isn't affected by it. Whereas like the orange, yes, you need to have a download required for this. Yes, you can beat the game, but otherwise it's going to have like tons of bugs. or it's missing a whole bunch of story content. And whereas like the red, yes, you need to have a download required, is there's a they literally write it out. It has a hard-coded prompt for a download, misses essential content, or isn't on the media at all.
Yeah, that's insane, honestly. Like, we've gotten to the point where we're effectively sending, like, ghost physical copies of games, I feel like.
That's a good way of looking at it. Like, when I look at all the list of the literal dozen Switch 2 games on here, it's largely green, other than a couple yellow no's on the download required. So that is, reminder, it's content complete, but there are a handful of bugs that are either too severe or too many to provide a flawless experience, or it's missing content outside of the base game. If they included any key card on there, that would be a guaranteed red, yes, download required. But it might support offline play.
Yeah.
Whereas like on if I look on Series X here, there's a couple like orange yes downloads, a couple of red yes downloads, a couple that like surprised me. Like one of them that's like, no, it doesn't play offline, and yes, it requires a physical, or it requires a download. Like there's a Warhammer 40K game that's got that. Forza Motorsport, yes, that requires a download, and no, it can't be played offline. Like, yeah, it's just kind of a sad state of affairs on here. Oh, Call of Duty Vanguard can't be played offline and requires a download. What a surprise.
What a shocker by Activision Blizzard.
Which is effectively, in this case, Microsoft.
Yeah.
So, now that we've put all this together, is there hope? Do you think there's hope, or is there no hope?
I think there is hope. I think there's hope. I think there is, but the problem is I think it's closing. Because the thing that I've noticed in this industry that happens a lot is that as soon as something becomes relevant and is allowed to be prevalent in the video game space, it will eventually lead to everyone is going to try some form of it. And I think with the situation with the key cards, I think we're looking at a position of it will probably make other consoles look at it from the perspective of, oh, well, we can do this too with some different type of technology we need. So we could very well see this with like the PS6, with like the new Xbox when that comes out, and it sucks because it's like physical media is like a lot better of a way to make sure stuff lasts longer, as long as you're taking care of it, obviously. Like, digital has its perks. I'm not going to say that it doesn't, as someone who owns a few digital games themselves, especially on Steam.
Mm-hmm.
But digital also has a very higher chance of just going away on an unexpected whim. Like, for example, like, recently there was, like, Steam had Spec Ops: The Line until they lost the licensing rights because of, I think it was the music used in the game. So Steam had to take it off of their stores. So you cannot get that there. But if you do want to get it physical, like on the PlayStation 3 or the Xbox 360, you can still do that. Because I think that is, I don't want to call it a workaround, because I don't think that's intended to be what it's supposed to be. But it's like, it's really hard to undownload the song on a completed game when they already made this decision saying, hey, we're going to use this in the game and we're going to mass produce this. And, you know, the music company said, okay, that's chill, go for it. Until all of a sudden digital rights become a huge thing with that. And now, oh, well, you don't have the rights anymore, so you can't legally sell it. Like, and it's the same thing with, like, I love Poker Night at the Inventory games, both 1 and 2. And it makes me upset that I can't go and just buy them for anybody, because those are games that are effectively lost media to some extent. And it sucks. But, like, I still own them on my Steam, so I can still at least download them for as long as Steam continues to be a service. But it sucks when you see, like, really good games that, like, are gone because of a technicality or anything like that, and now we're in a position where, like, the whole game essentially becomes a technicality, because it's like you need something else to kind of be the middleman to make sure that you can enjoy your game. And I don't know if I fully want to accept that as oh, this is the future. I don't want it to be the future, if I'm being completely fair. I just want it to be able to be in a position where I can say, okay, I own this game. I can play this game for as long as it still works. And I take very good care of my games. I'm very proud of that fact specifically. But I do think that there is a point where I'm just... I don't know. I just seem to have this, like, bias against finding ways to keep physical media from being made because it doesn't make the, like, 7 guys in a boardroom the most money imaginable versus how much enjoyment are the millions of people going to get from playing this game. Everything that we've kind of seen in the modern ecosystem of video games has really started to kind of make me feel like I've become more of a boomer as of late, where, like, you know, microtransactions with, like, the start of, like, the horse armor in Skyrim, for example, or one of the Elder Scrolls games. I think it was Skyrim. And then now microtransactions, DLC, all this jazz. This is very common practice now, which I still feel a little bit iffy about because it's like if it was being made for the main game, but you decided to sell it as an add-on, you're a dick. If you sell it as a DLC, but it was because, oh, we weren't able to get, like, the rights right away for some of that stuff, like, for example, I think Sephiroth was kind of in that same boat with Smash Ultimate, or one of the DLC characters, I think, was because of that.
We genuinely planned it for later.
Yes.
You know, it was never in the plan right away. It was this is the way we wanted to do it.
Yes. Like, there's valid reasons for those things. I'm not saying that they can't. Like, League of Legends constantly makes money off of how many skins that they can make off of people in a year. But they are not required to play the main game, which I think is fine. If you're going to be able to give people, like, hey, we want to get some really good skins for this character, you have an entire storefront of skins that you can pick and choose from and then use your own money for it. That is fine. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it. But it's like when you have to put them behind walls to make the game more beneficial to play, that's where it becomes a problem. Like, DLC and microtransactions should be the a la carte options versus, like, I don't feel like I got the full main course. Like, with Mario Kart, for example. Like, Mario Kart 8 had probably a better way of doing it because it was, like, so much of that stuff was still being developed for, like, the Booster Course Pass, but you didn't need it for the base game. You could have just played the base game and been completely content with what you got. 3 houses. Same thing. There's a whole, 4th house in there that they added in. Do you need it for the main game? No, but can you get it? Sure. Like, I think as long as you're treating, add-ons like that as a la carte versus, like, required, then it's fine. And with the key card situation, if you have to use the key card because there's maybe, like, something that requires it to need to be on a key card over a physical cartridge, okay. As long as there's validity to it and it's not just, oh, we're lazy. Which I think for a lot of these AAA companies, I hate to say it, are starting to get to that point of we're just going to be as lazy as possible with our products so that makes our bottom line fatter. And I don't like that methodology of it. Like, that's why I think a lot of indie companies nowadays, they're really starting to, like, pop off in a lot of cases. And it's mostly because when you have all these indie companies that are still operating kind of on how it used to be, and so much of that base that they've got now are people who appreciate how the industry used to be. That's why I think we're seeing a lot of them swarm to these indie developers and supporting those games over, the same lather, rinse, repeat games we're getting from AAA titles over and over and over again. And it sucks. I really think it sucks because it's like there's some really good franchises on those AAA companies, and they may die out just for the sake of greed. Like, I don't want to see those die out. I don't want to see physical media die out. But I'm waiting for, like, the timer to hit 0, if that makes sense.
You don't want to have perfectly good pieces of art made by teams that care be put to the wayside because, like you said, there's a handful of folks who need to make the most money that they can make off of it. You don't want that sacrifice.
Yeah, and it sucks because it's like I do firmly believe there are games that are going to be on keycards that will be very, very good, and some that are very, very good as it is. Like Split Fiction on Switch 2, understandable to an extent. I get it, but like make sure it is at least being a validity to use a keycard versus like, hey, we wanted to make this fully physical, we just didn't have the space for it though. It's like, okay, that I can at least look at it and be like, they're honest, they're transparent, versus, oh, this is just going to save us more money in the long run. It's like, if you're a small studio, sure, but even small studios, they don't seem to really want to hang their hat on those either. At least not all of them.
Well, there's a couple things there. So, like, I think Final Fantasy VII, there's the reason I've kept bringing that one up in this process, because the guy specifically talked about the load times aren't good enough. And even then, it's 90 gigabytes, which is past the capacity of the cartridges as we know them right now. My fear there, because while I agree with your logic on that, I'm definitely much more willing to play ball with that. Does it become a nice veil for those less desirable reasons you're talking about? I once again go back to our Resident Evil guy. Okay, so you're saying you're not doing this because you guys don't want to spend the money on the media. Does that mean that it would work on a cartridge? Because let's say they haven't even gotten to the point where they've tried putting it on the media and it wouldn't work that way either. Like, that's a way, 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 way better reason than, yeah, it's just kind of a sales decision for us. So, yeah, we want to make more money, right? That's way more defensible. God, yeah. I just don't know.
I think
I've talked. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say.
Still thinking.
I think it's because we have like this new thing still in the grand scheme of things. It's like we've had cartridges for a long time, we've had discs for a long time, and now we have key cards, which have effectively just been at an infant age so far. So it may change, it may not. I don't know. But
I remember the second piece I was going to talk about this. You brought up a lot about updates, DLC, downloads. Okay, well, to your point, you talked about a lot. It's like, well, a lot of this stuff isn't necessary to enjoy the game. You don't have to download the Booster Course Pass to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, because you can still perfectly enjoy what's in the base game. That's a lot of game you're missing out on, though. Is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe the same video game without all that secondary stuff? Is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate the same game if you don't have the dozen DLC characters for it and the stages that come with them for it? Is it a fundamentally different game? And at that point, I think there's a fair question about, like, well, if there's a lot of video games where they're simply not fundamentally the same game because there's going to be updates and DLC for them anyway, where do you draw the line with these physical games that you want, right? I mean, I guess to be fair, there are plenty of them where it is simply just the game and what it is on the cartridge, but like for these more multiplayer focused ones where they're going to do stuff like that, or even I guess story-based ones where they add on an extra campaign, I look at in my case where I've upgraded to some of these Switch 2 editions. Like I upgraded to the Kirby and the Forgotten Land Switch 2 edition because I was gifted a gift card. And it's like, oh, that's $20. It's a perfect use for it. That game that now runs at 4K and at 60 frames and has a secondary mini campaign, to me, is fundamentally not the same game as what I bought 4 years ago. Because if I put the game that I bought 4 years ago in my original Switch, it lacks all that extra stuff I just mentioned. So that's why I was fine downloading just the upgrade instead of going and buying it at the store. Comparatively, if I had the option, like let's say I really wanted to play Hades 2 right now as well, I'm just going to go straight up buy the Switch 2 edition. And I mean, I'm not the best example because I own the system, right? But even if I didn't own the system, that's the one I would go for, because at the end of the day, when I were to upgrade, that'd be the version I'd want, because it's the full featured one. You look at like some of the definitive editions or ultimate editions or whatever, that is the full-fledged game. Every single piece is on there in the best running state it can be. It's fundamentally different. Like, actually, I think I saw them on this this list here, and this made me think about this when I was on the Does It Play website. Street Fighter 5, the original, is fundamentally different from Street Fighter 5 Arcade Edition.
Right.
Because that one has way more stuff on it. So if I'm going to go for it, I'm getting the Arcade Edition. In that same way, it kind of raises the question, since these games that are on key cards are fundamentally different games from their other versions, what am I missing out for if I go with a key card compared to if I had it but only a portion were on the media, right? Those two versions wouldn't be the same game. So is there an impact? Not necessarily. So is there hope? Kinda. Does it matter though? It's also specifically tough to say because of all this background stuff in terms of updates and DLC and I have this terrible love-hate relationship with video games, and this is just the ultimate example of it. Well, the very last thing I would want to do here before we sign off, unless you have more that you want to say first. Do you have more that you wanted to say first?
I think we've kind of touched on it. We've done 3 episodes on this. And I don't mean that as a joke. I just mean it as
No.
This is such a complicated topic, as we've shown, that and yeah, we're just 2 guys on the internet basically, but we have very honest opinions about it, and it's we don't know what the future's going to hold with it. So it's do we hope that it ends up being a positive in the long run? Sure. But
is that how it's going to turn out in reality?
We don't know.
We can only go based on what evidence there is right now. And right now it's there's kind of hope, but it doesn't much matter if all this other stuff keeps happening with it regardless. The last thing I wanted to highlight, so I'm not pointing this out because I want to give ourselves a pat on the back, but our first episode in this 3-part series here actually got some of the most play on YouTube in a long time for one of our episodes, which probably sounds like it did super extremely amazing. By that I mean it has 3 views, which is better than nothing. And it even has a comment on here that I find interesting. I hope this isn't going to be the same situation as the last time I read one of these comments where you're hey, that's my buddy. But I'm going to read it anyway because I think it's interesting. This is from his actual profile picture shows you goes by Matroid. So Matt mixed with Metroid. He said, quote, "Great convo, guys. Absolutely hate key cards, and I avoid them like the plague. Hate it because third party on Switch 2 looks visually more impressive than first party so far, but if they're fake physical, I don't want them. If we're truly on the brink of all digital, maybe time for me to retire to my massive backlog of actual physical games that I'll never finish before I die, and just occasionally play new games. Either way, I'm realizing Switch 2 may be my last Nintendo console, and that definitely sucks. Oh well, nothing lasts forever." And then he has an emoji of the kind of ha 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 with a sweat bead. And that's the phrase I'm looking for. So that's the end of his comment. And yeah, I can totally see where he's coming from with this though. It's just kind of demoralizing. The kind of way I would respond to this is I totally get where you're coming from, but like we've talked about here, it's sadly, this is just sort of the reality across a lot of hardware to one extent or another. And, while I totally get where you're coming from, I just always go back to this is a good opportunity to take advantage of sales and take advantage of the fact that we have local shops that are worth supporting with this as well. So by all means, if you're someone who's like, I don't want to basically do anything with modern video games anymore, like, go for that, but take advantage of the fact that we also have some like decent options too before we completely let ourselves become like nihilists with this industry that we consume the pieces of art that come out of it. Well, shall we sign out, or any last words before we leave here today?
I think it's going to be a situation right now moving forward is, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. It's like, if this is something that we do not want in the industry as a whole, prove it with your wallets. Do not buy the key card games, just buy the cartridge games. Make sure that your voice is being heard via your money, because that is the only way a lot of these video game companies will listen. And if you have to, it's just something that needs to be watched. I don't want to say and come out right that this is like the worst thing. And if anything, like coming out of the last 3 episodes we've talked about it, there has been some parts of my argument that I would say changed a little bit for key cards to an extent, but not like a huge amount that moves the needle a lot. But I do think that we need to kind of be careful with like what we're just kind of allowing to be in the industry, just for the sake of, are we calling this as a thing for convenience, or are we calling this for a thing for just cutting costs? Or are we just trying something new to see if it sticks to the wall? There's a lot of things. Like, it is good to improve. It is good to come up with new ideas. I'm not going to ever say that trying to come up with better options isn't beneficial. But it has to be beneficial. So this, I think, is going to be something that, like, maybe by this time next year, maybe we'll revisit the Key Card Conundrum and kind of see, like, where is it at right now? Are more companies doing it? Are less companies doing it? Is it actually affecting to first-party manufacturers now? We won't know. It's not going to happen until, it actually happens. So, maybe in a year, maybe whenever we decide to revisit this topic down the road, or if something major happens with it all, we'll revisit it. But I think for now, I think that's everything that I've got to say on the subject. At least I hope. Because if we have 4 episodes of key cards, I might actually bash my head against the table right now.
Yeah, we're done with this today.
Yeah.
Don't worry. This is the end of it until we do a revisited, if we do a revisited in the future. I guess my last word on it is, I don't want folks to get completely 100% demoralized, because then you're going to let the companies win in that sense, right? If you take the situation and reward those who are doing what we want to see, I think that's ideal. If if we find ourselves in a place where it's like we just see this slope keep getting steeper and steeper and steeper, I'm not going to tell you to just just stop playing modern video games, because that's not realistic. And if anything, it might not end up mattering anyway, because we have to also contend with the general public on this as well, right? EA isn't going to care about this handful of us who are like mad that Madden NFL 26 is on a key card, because there's some kid who likes football who only has a Switch 2 who's going to pick that up because they see it on the shelf and they want it. So there's really no stopping that, right? But to the extent that we can make an impact, do that by like kind of the things we talked about. Avoid the ones that, even though you might want it, like make it clear why you're not purchasing it. And then when you decide to go for it, get it when it's like super duper cheap, or go to your local shops and give them the money for it. They're the business that you want to keep in business. So, all right. Okay. Hour 40, we did pretty good here for having 40 minutes of intro or so, I'd say. And who knows, by the time I cut this down, we might be at like 129 for all I know. But I don't think I'm going to actually end up cutting out that much so far. We'll see. You never know once I get into the editing room. But with all that, we would love it, folks, if you could do any kinds of engagement on this. If you want to like it, share a comment. I'm still looking for my first message in the inbox at speakpipe.com/endlessconversationloop. You can send one of those there, and we will play it out on this show as well. Otherwise, yeah, if you leave a written comment, chances are we might end up reading it off here like we did for Mr. Matroid. But with that, my name is Brandon.
My name is Boom. And before we sign off, we have one more thing before I forget.
Uh-oh.
So,
surprise?
Not really a surprise, more just kind of a precursor to our next episode. So, this will be episode 50 for your podcast there, Brandon Boy. And we have been kind of planning at least some more specific talks, I think, with this episode, since it is such a milestone. It's episode 50 for you, and this is technically, I think, episode 20 for me since I joined.
Mm-hmm.
So I think something that we're going to try to do with this next episode is we're going to get a little bit more personal with, like, kind of more specific things that we have with our gaming journeys, I think. Like, it might be a longer episode. I don't know exactly how long our stories and all that jazz is going to go, but we will be probably spending a lot of time kind of just dissecting kind of, you know, the years of gaming and all that we've been doing. But that'll be our last episode probably for the year, hopefully, if we don't do like a spur of the moment one since then. But
yeah, basically what I would envision for it is like that, but it's more of our like creative journey in terms of like how we've used that to, you know, express ourselves. Like in this case, largely talking about like, oh, how did I come to the podcast? How did we get to this point where we have 50 episodes? Oh my goodness.
That's wild. And that is wild.
Isn't it? It's yeah. And with the bulk of them coming from this year, it seems like.
Just wait, we're going to be at like a point that we're going to have 50 episodes with both of us at some point.
Mm-hmm.
That will be insane. I don't know what we're going to do for that episode, but that'll be fun.
That'll be another interesting milestone. And then 20 after that, it'll be 100 probably, like, because it should be around 80. But yeah, that'll be a good one. And like you said, I'm thinking we'll take a little bit of a holiday break because, man, it's this time of year is also just a pain because we got Thanksgiving, then we got Christmas, and then we got New Year's, and then finally it's back to the grind. So we need to take a little bit of time away after that. I figure unless there's just some absolutely earth-shattering news that comes out that is worth covering.
Unless we get, like, girlfriends or something like that between now and then Valentine's Day also gets thrown into that mix. So it's like, basically, for 4 months, we have, like, a major holiday for the foreseeable future. And then, like, March hits finally, and it's like, okay, we kind of died down a little bit. Now what?
Mm-hmm. No, I think we'll buckle down in January. This isn't like we have to go travel and see people. That's kind of more what I mean with the holidays and such. But
yeah, and ever since my whole fun time of between like August to now, basically, has been kind of chaotic in its own right. So the fact we even got episodes out, honestly, I'm kind of satisfied about. But hopefully next year is going to have a lot less road bumps, and then that might lead us to being able to get more stuff going on out there. But we'll probably have way more stuff to talk about next year, too, that we'll definitely be able to kind of break down. And hopefully, as we get more listeners, maybe they can pitch us some ideas if we haven't already done them on the podcast, because I'm definitely down to take viewer suggestions.
Yep. Always down to see what people want to hear us talk about, because it's good to satisfy the audience as well. Alrighty. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. We will talk to you next time on the Big 5-0. Woo!
That's right. Half a century worth of podcasts. Let's go.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.